You're listening to Cursive Script. New writing from the Kingston Writing School.
Hello? Hello? Hello, little folk. Do you know who I am? Just guess. Why, you've heard of me every Christmas. Who is it you say? Hush, close all the doors, and I'll tell you a secret. I'm old Santa Claus. Perhaps you are surprised to find me hiding in this phonograph, for I'm right here inside.
From Twelfth Night to Narnia, from A Christmas Carol to the Doctor Who special, winter is a time for tales. In this issue of Cursive Script, we bring you fiction, poetry, and the occasional tune, all on a wintry theme. We begin with this piece from Jonathan Barnes, from his upcoming novel Fidelity. Jonathan is the author of The Somnambulist and its indirect sequel, The Domino Men. A resident writer at the Kingston Writing School, he lives in London and reviews for the Times Literary Supplement. The reader is Toby Spearpoint.
My true name is Joseph Sparkhall, and I was born in the final moments of the year 1899. In the city of Norwich, in the county of Norfolk, not more than 20 miles from that patch of ocean which was soon to be occupied by the island of Fidelity. My birth was not an easy one. I tumbled and twisted in the womb, tangling myself in my umbilical cord as though determined to obstruct the efforts of the midwife. When, at last, at irreparable cost to my mother, I was finally persuaded to emerge, I arrived plaintive and irascible, needing no tap, slap, or pinch to bring me to tears. I came into the world already screaming. It had been, as I understand it, a day of portents. Early in the afternoon, 10 hours before the arrival of the island, as my mother strained and screamed and sweated, a party of friends, who had chosen to defy the wind and rain in order to take a stroll along the pier at Great Yarmouth, observed, flocking towards the mainland, a frantic exodus of seabirds, the sight of which left them with a profound and enduring sense of unease. An amateur ornithologist who walked among the company was heard to remark sombrely that he should not care to meet whatever it was which had startled the curlews and kittiwakes so. As they passed overhead, the birds blotted out the light of the sun, and I have often wondered how it must have felt to those who were present, whether it seemed to them as though night were falling prematurely. Later that evening, as celebrations were being conducted in the town, a young couple, recently betrothed, who had gone for a walk along the shingle in an effort to escape that enforced jollity and those suffocating good intentions of their families, witnessed strange lights out at sea, moving in patterns which the lovers found to be both eerie and strangely beguiling. In a statement made to the Eastern Daily Press, once it had become apparent precisely what it was those lights had prefigured, they swore they had also made out tall plumes of particularly coloured smoke. It looked, the young man said, as though a great and terrible fire had been lit beneath the ocean. Not long before the new year was due to be rung in, almost at the moment of my birth, a tremendous shuddering was felt throughout all the towns on the outer rim of eastern England. There was in every household a rattling of tea sets, a shattering of tiles, a poltergeist tumbling of books from shelves, and the noise of it as of something vast and buried breaking free, carried as far as the Cathedral of Norwich, where the Dean was witnessed muttering prayers of protection beneath his breath. Then, or so at least I have been told, there was something less simple to describe. A strange blunting of pleasures. Laughter died, suddenly and inexplicably, in the mouth. Expressions of love curdled mid-sentence into recrimination. Physical intimacies turned in a moment into savagery. Shortly after midnight on January the 1st, 1900, the island of Fidelity rose above the surface of the sea. 4 miles long and 1 mile wide, composed in her entirety of a dense, black, granular matter, very much like dust or ashes, she appeared in the midst of those international waters which lie between the coasts of Holland and the United Kingdom. Bleak, cold, profoundly ill-suited to human habitation, tormented by gales and lashed by rain, there was nothing at all about her to suggest what she would become. How mighty, how endowed with influence, nor any indication of the nature of that strange transformation which she was to work upon the world. Steady she goes, and heave! Heave! The first human beings to look upon Fidelity were the crew of a small fishing vessel, the Song of Songs, which ran aground at the northernmost tip of the island just before dawn of the same day. 13 men had set out from Yarmouth Harbour that morning, but only 3 of them returned, and just one lived long enough to give any account of what had befallen them. Before the week was over, he had told his story for the final time to the doctor who had attended him, and was subsequently removed to a sanatorium where he was to live out his remaining years without ever again forming a sentence greater than 4 words. I was privileged once to read a copy of his testimony, and I have never forgotten the effect that it had upon me, the appalling sense that it made of my life. The survivor could remember little about how the boat had been half-wrecked upon the island, although he admitted that the crew's decision, apparently unanimous, to disembark and explore, appeared in retrospect to be a bafflingly reckless one. It was at this point, as he did his best to describe what they had seen there, that the man's story broke down almost to incoherence. He described how the crew of the Song of Songs had waded ashore through warm water, how, choked by steam and gas, they had struggled to make themselves heard above the sound of a bass drone whose origin could not readily be discerned. He spoke of deep mists, of fires blazing in the distance, of a certain terrible grandeur in the topography of the island, and of the repellently unnatural qualities of her landscape. Then, as his voice diminished to a cracked whisper, he told of those dark, black shapes which, to begin with, they had only glimpsed from the corners of their eyes. In the years that followed, these were the attributes which came to define the island in the public imagination, to predominate the way in which the rest of the world thought about the place. Her fires and mists, her grandeur and deformities, her shadows, moving in the darkness, almost out of sight. The discovery in international waters of a new landmass might reasonably be expected to fire the starting pistol for some manner of international competition. But in the instance of Fidelity, there was a curious unwillingness to act. Certainly there was no scramble to her shores, no race to stake a claim, no wrangling over the rights to her exploitation. The scientific expedition, which was eventually launched on January the 15th, 1900, was a joint one. commanded by an Englishman, Colonel Samuel Thacker, but manned predominantly by the Dutch. Whether such relatively rare cooperation might be said to have been indicative of that universal spirit of the pioneer which transcends all boundaries and borders, or whether the collaboration arose simply as a means by which the not inconsiderable cost of an endeavour, which must have then appeared profitless and irrelevant, might be divided, is a question that I leave for the listener to decide. Years later, I came across poor Thacker's obituary, yellowing and curling at the edges in my father's desk. Although the piece obfuscated or diluted into euphemism the probable circumstances of his passing, Colonel Thacker emerged from those 5 brief paragraphs as a decent, lion-hearted man, albeit a doggedly conventional one. Small wonder that the island never accepted him. Fidelity always favoured the square pegs and the misfits, the heterodox, the liabilities, the dangers to themselves and others. It seems unlikely that we shall ever know the precise nature of what happened to those men. But it should be noted that the records once contained an interesting account concerning a quantity of driftwood which was washed ashore on the beach at Lowestoft 10 days after the departure of the Anglo-Dutch expedition. It was the custom of the local people at the time to scour the shore for flotsam under cover of darkness in ragged guilds of 10 or a dozen. On the night in question, one such group stumbled upon what appeared to be the splintered remains of a sizable vessel, which they subsequently carried home for firewood. They were poor men, used to pressing whatever they could find into service as fuel, but this particular piece of salvage sowed unease among them. The wood had been mangled and torn, and it was said that there were strange marks set upon it, unidentifiable stains and peculiarly troubling discolorations. 1 week later, the first corpse from the Thacker expedition washed up on the same stretch of coastline. Pale and bloated from its days in the ocean, although it was officially denied, rumours soon began to spread that the cadaver had been badly gored and savaged, and over the next few days the tide gave up all but one of the rest of them, Englishmen and Dutchmen alike, each more disfigured and despoiled than the last. This was our earliest warning of the island's hospitality, of the reception that she gave to the uninvited.
Fidelity, an extract, was written by Jonathan Barnes and read by Toby Spearpoint. Flash fiction next, from Graham Walker and Fiona Curran.
Diana's Cafe. He had that look of stoic anger, his lips drawn together tightly and his face contorted and focused. He never spoke, never even looked at you, apart from a cursory glance and nod as he took your order. You could tell he was angry by the way he banged everything loudly. The cups, the spoons, the plates, all thumped down to remind you that he existed, and what you saw wasn't really him. He shouldn't have been a cafe owner serving breakfast to the itinerant workers and passing office staff. Inside he was an artist, a painter, a writer, perhaps even an opera singer. This was all an illusion, and he wanted you to know it. He was about 50 with grey receding hair. He wore large glasses that accentuated his eyes, and he had this way of staring right through you as if you weren't there. He wore a grubby, open-neck, short-sleeved white shirt, and you could just make out the top of his vest, sweaty and stained. He spoke sparingly, a mixture of English and Italian, and moved about almost militarily behind the formica-top counter, adorned with pictures of Diana's specials. risottos, omelettes and fish and chips. The cafe was jaded, a throwback, almost a greasy spoon. All the walls had posters of London stars. Anita Dobson, cleavage accentuated. Anthony Quinn holding a machine gun. Bob Hope smiling at some Red Indians. It had obviously been his dad's, and that's perhaps why he felt so bitter. He never wanted this, but it was tradition and his father's legacy. A dumb waiter was the centrepiece, operated by a black pulley, which he yanked with all his might. He would fill it with plates stacked high and then lower it methodically to the depths below. It would return full of steaming dishes, which he would distribute to his clientele with a perfunctory "enjoy." He never smiled, but his regulars just nodded and devoured it quickly. The glass cabinet on the counter was Spartan to say the least. A huge slab of cheddar that had seen better days, some coleslaw, tuna mayonnaise, and an overcooked sausage that begged to be eaten. Specials were chalked on a blackboard: tuna grilled, £7, liver and chips with gravy, £8.50, chili con carne, £4.50, lasagna, £5, and the chef's special of the day, £3.50. A picture of an English lady lounging in front of a window was nailed to the wall, together with a Union Jack and a drooping plastic orchid that yearned for attention. There was no frivolity, no banter, just the clank, clank, clank of his banging the plates, the chomping of mouths eager to leave as quickly as possible, and the backdrop of the pulley moving upwards and downwards. He paused momentarily, opened a crumpled cardboard box and produced a small red Santa. He placed it on the counter next to the tip box and squeezed it gently. "Ho, ho, ho," it croaked. He tried to force a smile, but his lips moved only slightly before returning to their normal fixed position. Outside, the boutique cafe is filled with businessmen sipping their lattes and Americanos. Young female office workers stroll nonchalantly by, their phones pressed against their cheeks.
I told you that he could get a college grad to do my job for half the price. Well, I told him, try Empties, Found Items, and Islington Romance. A weird place for a palm tree, you think? No exotic location. You can say no to a warm boy, but a cool boy is a much bigger catch. And what he asks of you, you give him. On Saturday night, when the parents think you're safe and sound, but here you are, girl let loose, in the dangerous moment. You didn't much want the vodka. In 10 minutes the glow will be gone, but in your pockets you finger the Skittles. So now he has you lying under a concrete ledge, on top of black bags full of leaf mulch, rotting down beneath you. You wonder about your mate. Is she lying with her boy somewhere similar? A concrete outhouse, the park, knickers down in a piss-filled lift? And you watch your breath crystallise over his shoulder. There seemed to be light before, during the seduction, but as the bedroom lights in the flats go out, you are left in the pitch of intent. The dry mount, the stifled pain. You let him have you.
some of the time will be better than this. You like him still and will like him when he messes with your mind repeatedly. He doesn't tie the condom up and you can't say why, but you think he should. And when he tucks himself in, he turns. So his face is lost to you. Caught a lit and you don't know why, but the shame spreads over you again. When you've put yourself back together, foot hood up, frozen hands in pockets, he pulls you to your feet. Before you leave, you open the Skittles. But he's not having those. And somewhere in another corner of North London, a mother cries in her sleep, "Not there, not there, not with my baby."
Diana's Cafe was written and read by Graham Walker. Empties, Found Items and Islington Romance was written by Fiona Curran and read by Jessica Chamberlain.
All night long, I've been climbing in and out of chimneys, leaving toys and candy and oh, such wonderful presents for all the little folks. For I still have a few presents for some little friends of mine. Let me see. Here is a toy steamboat, and a toy calliope, and a little toy piano. And now I'm going to sing for you my favorite song. Did you ever hear Santa Claus sing? Well, you're going to hear him now. Get up here.
Oh, winter sets in and it's gripped at my neck, and rowing boats and tape cassettes sailed south with the wind. And laundrettes and lucky bets are among the list of things that fled. I have a cold again. And once more, stapled to the floor, staring at bright white screens and thinking of boys with hearts of stone. There's a polyglider plane hung from my lampshade and it's nosedived at nothing. It's fading under light strain and a pink ribbon's hung limp around its belly. Winter's setting thick just beyond these rooftops, and the spires puncture the sky like sandstone needles, and I'm weary of the wind. And my throat's all scratched from cigarettes, and my heart is heavy. If only you knew. If only you knew. Sunday was so beautiful when the sun hit panes of glass and my knees bent down the street and rattling in the cold, and the world seemed violet behind dark glasses. Ultraviolet, like the skin that's stained under my eyes. Hugged a Saturday night. Well, I haven't a heart to break, so I'm off to hibernate. Well, I haven't a heart to break, so I'm off to hibernate. This lockdown is precise, once more stapled to the floor. Summer was ferocious, the cat that bit my heels and it ripped right through me. The floor is a sea of me, Mascara, eyeliner blown on tissues, beads, CDs, jumper, empty cans, and ironed books, remote control, glasses case, mug, paperweight, stereo, typewriter, drawing board, action tracker, shoe pen, mitten, watch, ticket, vinyl, scarf, sock, lantern, slipper, beads, brush. Iron, book, remote control, hope I die before I get old, jumper, CD, glasses case, I haven't got a heart to break. Iron, book, remote control, hope I die before I get old, jumper, CD, glasses case, I haven't got a heart to break. Iron, book, remote control, hope I die before I get old, jumper, CD, glasses case, I haven't got a heart to break. Woo! I haven't a heart to break. So I'm off to hibernate. Well, I haven't a heart to break. So I'm off to hibernate. I'm off to hibernate.
Some days are full-on nightmares, others are troubling dreams. I never know which one I'll get, so this morning I wake up early, put on simple clothes and go out on the front steps. The air is cloying and smells of faraway bonfires. The flats around me are empty now, most of them anyway, and I don't worry about my neighbours. I light a cigarette and keep an eye out for strangers.
Scarecrow, a short story by Portia Newland.
I know we need food, and when my cigarette is done and the sun is high enough, I push from the dew-damp steps and walk to the shops. At first they seem closed, which is unusual. I steel myself, take quick looks over my shoulder and bang on the wood that covers the doors, the windows. The streets are bare of people. The black tar and white lines glisten. Silence makes me jittery. I just want to go. I bang harder. I know the risk I'm taking, but none of us want to starve. After a long time, a slat of wood is removed and I can see an eye. It's black-ringed, tired. I gulp back what I really want to say and raise my voice. "Hi, it's Nicole from Iffley Road. Do you have 12 eggs?" The eye blinks, disappears. One of the kids, I guess. The adult soys know me well, although you never can tell. Personally, I think they're crazy to let them answer my knocks, but that's their business, I suppose. Maybe they're scared. Maybe something's happened. I stamp my feet on the ground, blow into my hands, and see my own breath dance before me. The eye returns and pushes a brown paper bag through the hole in the slats. I swap it for 6 batteries, grasp the bag tight. No boxes, and if they break, no breakfast. "Thanks. Is everything okay?" A quick nod. The slat scrapes closed. I stand there a moment, frowning, and remember, none of my business. I make my way back down the main road and see a man. He's standing not far from the Gold Hawk pub on the same side of the road as me, but far enough so I can't see his features, just a vague shape. He might not even be a man at all, but he's tall and big, and I go with my assumption. He's wearing a duffel coat with the hood up, which is even worse. He's not doing anything, just looking in my direction, and he might have seen me, might not. So I turn on my heel and start to walk, briskly, without looking back. I strain my ears to check if he's following, because it's so quiet these days you can practically hear for miles. But there's no sound, and when I get on the back roads that lead towards Hammersmith, I look over my shoulder and see he's not there. I jog then, all the way, holding the paper bag away from me, and Danny's there at the front steps with the gun, eyes full moons, even more when he sees me. I slow down, gasping. "What happened?" "Nothing," I'm panting. "I just saw someone by the shops, a man, I think. He didn't follow me, but I ran anyway." He lowers the gun. "Are you nuts, going off like that?" He's crying. Guilt shoots through me like cramp. I climb the steps, throw my arms around him. I shiver when he hugs me and I can feel his head turn, him raise the gun just a little, just in case we get jumped. This is what we have come to. This is who we have become. Let's go inside, he says. We take a final look over our shoulders, go up the steps, enter. The passageway is dark as oil, and so is the living room, as we have done as the Soys, boarded up windows and doors. There is lamplight, candlelight, which tends to be nicer than the bulbs. I pull off my hoodie and look for Pots. Danny stands behind me, sniffling, hands by his sides. Then he comes closer, stops me. I'm sorry, he says, for snapping at you. It's okay, I smile, and I mean it. I would have done the same, I think he knows. What did you get? Eggs. He puffs out a huge breath, catches himself. I know what he's thinking. Small, non-essential items, not worth dying for. But we need to eat. What are you making? Eggs Florentine. He shoots me a glance and we burst out laughing. Do you need help? Nah, not really. You relax. I continue my work, run water in the pan, set it on the hob, ignite flame, break eggs, simple, mundane things. I'm humming, and when I turn around, Danny hasn't moved. He raises an eyebrow at me. I'll go and check the scarecrow, he says, and then he is gone. I poach the eggs, boil the spinach and make hollandaise sauce as best as I can with only a whisk and a teaspoon of white wine vinegar. There's not much on the radio, but I turn it on at low volume and find the local station is still on air, probably broadcasting for one of those tower blocks, Danny says, as they'd be fools to advertise themselves from a maisonette council flat or anything on the ground like we were. We'd debated that for weeks, whether we should move to higher ground. There were pros and cons, and even then the pros were negligible. Danny had wanted to go. I said we should stay, and we went at it for ages, arguing back and forth right up until Sherwin came home. Of course, that changed everything. Danny said the obvious. If he'd found us, it was easy for others, but I countered that by saying it wasn't such a big deal. He just remembered, didn't he? I couldn't run the risk of him being a simp and all. I couldn't run off and leave him like so many others did to family, lovers, friends. I wasn't built that way. And Danny loved me so much, he understood. He let us all stay in the building together. I'm singing to jazz on the radio, swaying my hips when Danny comes down from the roof. He looks serious. I slide the eggs onto my homemade muffins and turn. What's up? I think I saw that guy. I stopped singing, put down the pan. He was walking along the street, didn't look up, but he was searching for someone. Maybe you, maybe someone else, I don't know. I'm sorry, I whisper. I'm looking at my trainers. It's okay, he says and kisses my forehead, and I'm grateful for that. We'll just have to be a bit careful when we go down. Sorry, I say again. He nods and gets out the plastic cutlery. I dish everything up and put on the crowbar. Danny's managed to tie a piece of rope to each end so I can carry it across my back like a samurai sword. We're desperately short of weapons. Some knives, a baseball bat, his gun, but we're too wary to forage outside of the streets we know, and the Soys won't sell the weapons they have. They need everything they can get. And if there's anyone else left in the neighbourhood, they're holding themselves up better than we are, and we probably wouldn't trust them anyway. We're ready. Danny goes over to the window and removes one of the slats. He looks up and down, left and right. All clear, he mutters. We leave the flat, Danny first, holding one plate and the gun, me behind him with two, one in each hand. God forbid we see anyone who has their own gun, but we've never mentioned that. And I push the thought to the back of my mind 3 times daily, every time we do this. We go down the stairs into the basement, and that's the tricky bit, the one where I'm most scared, as Danny has to put down the plate to open the flat with a key. And even though he still has the gun, his back is turned and my hands are full. That would be the perfect time to jump us, if any kill parties were watching. Or that man. We can't see what's going on above us, and the streets are so quiet, but even that's not reassuring. It could just mean someone's trying to sneak up on us. I wait and listen, and realise even the birds have stopped singing. I wonder when that happened. I've never noticed it before, and it makes me even more afraid, and I start to cry until I hear the basement door creak open. I wipe my eyes with my sleeve and go inside. The flat smells of musk, bodily waste, imprisoned air. The pipes emit a monotone hum. I keep swiping at my eyes, but this is just an excuse to cover my nose without Sherwin noticing. It's a studio flat. The front door leading to the open-plan living room, which goes into a bedroom on the right of the alcove that houses the kitchenette. The bathroom is at the rear, hardly used. Sherwin's tied by his wrists to the black leather business chair in the centre of the room. His head is bowed. He's either asleep or comatose. I put down the plates, go over, shake him and call his name. He raises his head. His eyes are dim, even in half-light, blank like a soft toy. The smell of urine is stronger. I step back, seeing the dark patch around his crutch. He catches my grimace. I couldn't wait. My hand is pushed into my mouth, forcing it all back, and I don't know how it got there. I catch him watching me, and the hand falls, my fingers spasm by my thighs. Danny touches my shoulder. I'll get the bowl, he whispers, and he's gone. Let's get these off you then, I say in the most cheerful voice I can manage, hearing myself sound like a nurse. I bend in front of him. His odour is thick and soupy, but I unbutton his jeans, grab the elastic of his boxers and pull both past his hips, Sherwin lifting in order to help, and then all the way down to his ankles, over his socks and into a sodden, acrid heap in my hands. He watches me all the way, even though I'm bowing my head now, and it's as though he can see what I'm feeling. That way I'm trying not to notice his penis or the rope around his wrists, though it must be pretty obvious because I don't lift my head from the clothes, and even when I stand, I simply ball them up and put them in the dirty clothes bag, pull the drawstring and face the bathroom where I can hear Danny running water. I wonder what's taking him so long. Can't even look at me then. I'm startled and then I have to. No, I smile. It doesn't last. Just waiting. Nicky, you know this is wrong. Let me go. No, Sherwin. I step towards him. Stop. You know I can't. I won't, he says, and the water stops running and he shuts his mouth, lets his head fall. His bare legs are skinny, dark like tree roots. I take 2 steps away from him, and then Danny is coming down the small passage, legs bowed like a cowboy holding the bowl. Water slops from either side. Danny puts the bowl down in front of Sherwin, between his feet. There's a cloth floating beneath the bubbles, which I take and begin to wash him with, not avoiding his penis this time, instead telling myself it's another part of him, maybe knees or toes. Steam rises from his body like dry ice. He forces a grim smile at the floor while this is happening, not looking at me. It must be embarrassing for him too. Danny sits with his back against the sofa, opposite us, pointing the gun. I snake the sweatshirt over Sherwin's head, wash his chest, beneath his arms, his upper back and shoulders. I drop the washcloth into the bowl and push it away, take the crowbar from my back and place it beside me, untie the ropes. While he flexes blood into his limbs, I pick up the crowbar and join Danny on the sofa. He eats standing on his side of the room. This is usual, he knows the rules. Standing is allowed, walking is not. He paces on the spot, lifting one knee and the next, putting his fork down to swing an arm, swap his plate to the opposite hand, swing the other. The food's cold, but this is also usual, for one reason or another. Cold weather, strangers outside our building, Sherwin needing to be changed. We eat in silence, rapidly, both hungry, both wary it seems. Yet Sherwin seems in good spirits, or better than he was. Before, when he first came back, he had complained, cajoled, shouted for hours. Danny had to go down when he started screaming in the night, took the gun and didn't tell me what he'd said, but the screaming stopped. Ever since, Sherwin looks at Danny with flames in his eyes. It's to be expected, I suppose, and still scary. That was nice, Sherwin says. Best muffins you've made. That's not just hunger talking either. Thanks, I mutter, head down. I'm holding the gun while Danny takes his turn to eat. So how long do you intend to keep this up? Out of interest? Danny looks up from his plate. Until someone comes, he says. Sherwin eyes him for a long time. Danny holds the stare until he sees me looking at them, ducks his head to shovel up the last of the muffin and alabaster sauce mixed with yolk. Sherwin keeps watching, points his plastic fork at me. You can't be serious. No one's coming. Radio says no one's coming. No police, no army, no one. They'll bomb the place and leave it at that. Danny shoots me a quick glance. We've had this conversation. I try not to hear the scrape of his fork against the plate. They won't. It won't solve the problem. Then what else? I open my mouth, shrug, and for a moment the gun's pointing at the boarded-up windows. Sherwin steps forward. "Nicole," Danny sucks in a sharp breath. I jump and point the gun at Sherwin, a brutal jerk of my wrist. Sherwin stops, forces his bitter smile at the floor again, holds up his hands. All right. He backs off and I'm glad. He drops to the floor and does his stretches, touches toes, grabs each ankle and forces his heel to his thigh, leans to the right and his left, one arm over his head. Then he goes through his exercise routine, push-ups, sit-ups, squat thrusts, jogging on the spot. It takes roughly 20 minutes, and in all that time he never takes his eyes from us, and we don't say a word, not to each other or him. When he's done it, he sits back down in the leather seat, hands on the armrest. "You can tie me up now," he says. "Do you want to use the toilet?" "No," he says, and I can see what he's thinking. He wants to punish me, have me clean him again. He wants to make a point. I could argue, but I know better. I can't very well make him. Cross that bridge when we get there. Danny gets up and reties his wrists. I point the gun, eyes damp, mouth shut firm, trying not to cry too hard. I'm making my arm shake, and it's not good for my aim. When Danny tightens the last knot, Sherwin gasps and gives him such a look I feel as though I've swallowed a frozen pebble. Danny walks back, studies his feet. I stand beside him. "Good luck," Sherwin says. Outside, I lock the door quietly. The sky looks like the inside of a seashell, pink and blue and glistening grey. Danny covers me. The stance he takes, both hands on the gun, head twisting with stiff jerks, would be ludicrous if I wasn't so frightened. He goes up the stairs first, and on the ground floor we swap. I put down the plates, unlock the door to our flat, pick up the plates and go inside. It's a slow, laborious business, but after what happened to the woman at 64, we take our time. No sense hurrying to lose your life. I let myself into our flat, notice Danny hanging back. I frown. "I was thinking maybe I should work." "What, now?" "Before it gets dark." "But it's not even 12. "Yeah, but the later it gets, the more difficult it'll be. It is winter." There is logic in his argument. I can see that. I don't want it, though. I want tea, hugs, conversation. I don't want him to go out there again. "You could go tomorrow, early." Danny says nothing. I don't even make sense to myself. We're running low. Of what? I know full well what he means. Everything. It's only the house. I'll be back before dark. "Okay, if you say so." He comes over, holds me close, kisses the top of my head between the centre parting of my braids. "I'll be okay, promise." "Take this," I say, and duck beneath the cold embrace of the crowbar, lifting it from my shoulders and over my head. He puts it on his back. I give him the keys. "Don't answer the door to anyone who knocks any time, not even me," he says. "Promise?" I promise. Back soon. Love you. I love you too. The door shakes when it slams. I stand there for a long time, hoping he changes his mind. I wonder what Sherwin's thinking. Inside, the door double-locked behind me, I make tea and sit by the window, one slat removed, watching 64. I shouldn't really expose us, but I need more sunlight. I don't want to see the house, but it's right in front of me. There's nothing else to do but look. I don't want to remember what I saw, but it's there in my head. It was 3 weeks after the comet, early Sunday morning. We'd made love, lay in bed shivering and not talking about Sherwin, when we heard screams coming from the street. Danny got up, the gun tight between his fingers, and removed the slat very carefully. It was the young woman. I didn't know her name, but she lived alone, had ever since I moved in. She had her shopping trolley with her, had been on her way to the Soys maybe, when a small kill party must have caught sight of her, only 4 men. They surrounded the woman and were pushing her from one side to the other like bullies, laughing loud, whooping, using each push to tear clothing, punch or kick her, rip the trolley from her hands and throw it into someone's basement. The woman was screaming, an odd breathy sound that reminded me of when I'd punctured the hose on my vacuum cleaner. It was difficult to see what weapons they had, but there must have been a knife, because after one big push she clutched her stomach, and the laughter got louder and her cream dress grew red with blood, and she stumbled and dropped to her knees, and that's when they fell on her, punching, kicking and stabbing until she lay still in the middle of the road. One of them dragged her body all the way down the road by the ankle until they were out of sight, the rest still kicking at her. God knows what they did afterwards, as if that wasn't enough. And we watched. We sat inside our house and watched, didn't do a thing. Danny put the slat back as carefully as he'd removed it, went to work that night, and came back with the replica gun. I finish my tea and replace the slat, wander around the flat. We have leftover sausages, and I can mash the few potatoes we have left for tonight's dinner, but I hope Danny comes back with meat. His parents' house is just past Ravenscourt Park, 20-minute walk. The first time he went, he stayed in the house for almost a week, but that scared me so much he promised he'd never do it again. They're dead, of course, his parents. Danny made sure of that. He goes over every few days and gets most of our food from there, raiding their massive freezer. It won't last forever, we know that. Then he'll have to forage elsewhere. Danny calls it work, and I let him because men need purpose in life. Plus it gives us a sense of normality. Before the comet, I work too, real work, but foraging isn't a job either of us wants me to do. I play the traditional role now. Truth is, I don't mind. Better than being out there. I need a cigarette. Danny doesn't smoke, which means I have to go out onto the roof. I gather my smoking paraphernalia, lock our flat, open the door to old Mr. Fallon's flat, cover my nose against the slaughterhouse stench, go into the attic and up the metal ladder, pull myself onto the roof into the fresh air. There, needed that too. The roof is flat, open. When the wind blows hard enough, black dust circles like a hungry pet. There's a rusting barbecue in the corner, a threadbare sofa that stinks of cat piss, and of course the scarecrow. He's roped to a sun lounger, and it's only then that the irony strikes me. Sherwin and old Mr. Fallon both tied up, both dead. I want to laugh and can't, even when I force it. I avoid the scarecrow and sit on the edge of the sofa, light my cigarette. By the 4th week, we realised we hadn't heard anything from old Mr. Fallon and began to get scared right away. What should we do? What would he return as, simp or psych? The government statement the radio man read told us it took 3 days before they turned. We put our heads against the wall and listened for a sound. We reasoned that he'd left without us noticing, slipped away, not into a quiet old man's death, but into the cold winter night. Later we heard movement downstairs from the flat. We looked at each other. We knew it was him. Danny went to check. Said he might have to do Mr. Fallon like he did his parents, and I shouldn't come down under any circumstances. Then silence made me want to scream, and then I heard banging, a shot. When I went downstairs, old Mr. Fallon was dead for good, a hole right between his eyes like the radio man told us we should. I wouldn't have had the guts. Danny was breathing hard, eyes darting, angry. I don't think he wanted me to see him that way. Somehow, using nothing more than rope and brute strength, Danny managed to haul the body into the attic and further up the metal ladder onto the roof. I tried to help as best I could, holding Fallon's legs and pushing when he pulled, but I know I was pretty useless. Danny put a puffy winter coat on old Mr. Fallon, a Halloween mask he'd found somewhere to cover his face, flipped the hood and tied him to the sun lounger, wrapped rope around his waist. Of course, the scarecrow could draw attention, although it seemed to work for now. From what little I could tell, psychs are pretty cowardly. Danny says they only pick on humans who can't fight. I smoke my cigarette and think on that. I watch streetlights come into life, and for the 1000th time I wonder when they'll stop. That's when we know we've truly passed the point of no return. That's when we know the lives we had are gone. I wait for that moment each time the dusk comes, and though I breathe a sigh of relief when I see their glow, I can't help thinking I'm one day closer to the evening I won't. I smoke another fag down to the writing. Hey! Hey! I fall, slumping onto the floor, on my back, roll over and stub the cigarette out in 3 quick thumps. What was I thinking? Danny will kill me. I'm lying there, breathing in dust, trying not to sneeze or cough. I know you're up there. I can see you and your smoke. I swear, a whispered curse. The scarecrow. He could see the scarecrow. I'm not going to hurt you. You're with the girl, aren't you? The girl I saw at the shops. His voice is raw with shouting. I can barely hear him. Wouldn't be able to if it wasn't for the silence. I'm just trying to help. I'm alive. There's nothing for a long while and I'm kneeling, almost getting to my feet when he starts again, and I duck even though he can't see me. Stay away from the soys, all right? They've got a psych. She'll kill them all. I wait for him to say more, heart pounding, and I don't hear anything for ages. There's a rush of rapidly moving feet like someone slapping tarmac, the noise echoing from walls and paving slabs. I get to my feet and climb downstairs into old Mr. Fallon's flat, into the communal corridor and into our flat, snick the door shut. Sherwin's calling for help in a desperate, raw voice. I couldn't tell from the roof, but in my flat it's loud, obvious. There's shuffling on the steps outside my window and Sherwin hears it too because he stops calling. A minute later the front door opens and shuts, the flat door opens and shuts, and Danny's home. What's going on, he says, face pale, eyes bright. He's holding a white plastic bag. Nothing. I know I won't get away with that and put a hand to my head, play with my hair. I went for a smoke and that guy from this morning, I think he saw me. He was shouting. Danny mouths something harsh, shakes his head. So now he knows we're here. He doesn't. He didn't see anything. He saw me. I push my lips together. He has a point. Danny pulls something from the plastic bag. For a moment I swear it's a human limb, and then I realise it's not. It's just a joint of meat. The sides shine in the candlelight. He slams it on the kitchen counter and I wince. Dunno whether we should have it for dinner or use it for self-defence. I laugh on cue. He's looking at the meat, not smiling. Beef, I say, going to the counter. Lamb, he replies. You know we have to do Sherwin, right? He has no expression. I don't either. I know because I'm holding it in like my basement tears. The hum of the pipes is louder than ever. Why? He's going to get us killed, shouting like that. There's kill parties everywhere. If they hear him, it's over. I'll talk to him. He won't listen. He will, if I tell him we're serious. You can't, not now, after all this time. Danny sighs, and I know what that means. It's not like I want to. I know that. It's just I don't want to lose you. Me neither, I say, and I kiss him, feel his cold lips against mine. It's freezing out, he says, watching me. Well, we only have to go downstairs, that's it. I make the mash, reheat the sausages and have a late lunch. We eat upstairs first and take it down after. I figure that's better. Danny doesn't have to stay as long, won't get agitated. Sherwin doesn't say anything about his yelling, or the fact we've eaten already, and neither do I. His eyes are soft, pleading. He's soiled himself like I knew he would, and I have to clean it all up and change him. But that's better than the permanent alternative, and we all know it. We creep upstairs, ever on the lookout for the guy from the shops, or anyone else, and as soon as we're inside, I'm boiling water for soup. Danny chops beside me, throws vegetables into the pot, and we let it all boil while I read a novel and he listens to music. His eyes are closed. His foot taps out constant rhythm, and I'm trying to concentrate on the words on my page, but I keep getting distracted by Danny. What he said. And as much as I try to ignore it, force it to the back of my mind like everything else that's happened over the last 2 months, I can't. I just can't. The soup's become a gorgeous smelling mush. We turn off the heat, dish it into bowls and take it down. This time Sherwin is clean, and when he eats with a plastic spoon, his eyes are grateful. Danny ignores him, mouth a solid dark streak. The atmosphere is thick as my soup. Sherwin eats like there was little or no lunch, performs his exercises, and asks to use the toilet. We try not to listen, don't talk while he's gone. When he comes back and sits down, he winks, gives me a tiny smile. Thanks, sis, he says. Danny and I maintain our silence until we're back upstairs. He flops on the bed and lies with his hands behind his head, eyes closed. I remain standing, listening to noises from the street. Dustbins falling. The shuffle of rifled contents. Either dogs, foxes, or people. So, what do you think? He lifts his head, chin tucked into his chest, hands still clasped. I can hardly see his eyes. Better, he says. Much better. We make love, fall asleep. In what feels like an instant, I'm there at the beginning. The night the comet passed, low enough in the sky for the world to see, close enough for glittering snow to fall like twinkling slivers of disco light, beautiful confetti, everyone said. I see snowfall for one whole day, non-stop, televised news reports from Moscow, Dubai, Singapore, New York and Bolivia, scientists in TV studios saying it's fine. Just residue from the comet, harmless. I see people that died after that night return 3 days later, coming back like combat soldiers to lovers and families, knocking on doors and windows, not in a zombie arms outstretched kind of way, but really back to life, with memories and feelings, just like me and you. Thousands in London, millions all over the world, old, young, fresh and unspoiled as the day they were born, bodies cold and hearts still, otherwise normal at first. I hear news reports saying these dead people, the returned, are violent. They attack without provocation, kill in some cases, seemingly enjoy the harm and panic they cause. I see open battles on streets, feel the body-shaking rattle of bombs, the police and army overwhelmed, the National Guard beaten, thousands of psychotic returnees, psychs as they become nicknamed, fighting bitter battles and winning. I listen to the radio when the TV becomes inactive, government statements telling us that authorities have learned there are two factions, the dead who love to kill and the dead who do not, psychotics and sympathetics, psychs and simps. And it's difficult to tell which is which. They are evacuating the city. And then I see empty streets, neighbours wishing us well and leaving, silence in their wake, us packing to go when the knock comes. And when we lift the slat, my brother is there in his blood-splattered army uniform, waiting patiently, head low. There's shouting, Danny waving the gun, even though that part didn't happen like that, and Sherwin is being led into the empty flat downstairs, and Danny kicks off the door, which really did happen, and it's all threats and rope, and though in reality Sherwin simply looked at me, pleading with his eyes for me to make Danny stop, in the dream he's screaming, tears rolling down his cheeks, saying, "Save me, Nicky, save me." And I feel a wrench in my gut, and I wake to feel the crushing pressure of night and the silence, and I know Danny's going to kill my brother. I slide out of bed, Danny snoring on his back. I pick the crowbar from where I always leave it, next to my bed, grab my dressing gown, keys, and creep to the flat door, let myself out. The night's mild, the moon high and bright. The air is filled with moisture. I loved nights like these not long ago. A fox spies me, eyes gleaming, runs. I go down the stairs with my crowbar raised, let myself in with Danny's keys. Sherwin is sleeping, chin tucked into his chest, dribbling. I shake his arm. He jerks, looks around, mumbles. "Shh! What are you doing?" he's hissing. "Go," I say. "Get out of here, now. We'll meet at the evac point on Wormwood Scrubs." He's unsure, snakes himself free anyway. I hug him tight, the first time I've done it since he returned, and it's like holding a block of ice. He pulls away. "I better go then." "Okay, go." He heads for the open door. I see orange light stream inside the flat, his silhouette. I take a last look around and leave. Sherwin's limping up the concrete stairs and I follow. Then I see something from the corner of my eye. Sherwin stops, raises his hands, slow, palms up. "Thought so," Danny says from our flat door, gun pointing at Sherwin. "He'll kill us both, Nicole. You don't see it." I scream, hear my own voice echo from bare streets. There's a shot and Sherwin falls onto me, holding his shoulder. Danny's fighting with someone. I realise it's the man, the one who followed me. They're fighting for the gun. Sherwin has recovered, is leaping the stairs, running. I want to go with him, but instead I jump the steps and throw myself at the man, wrenching at limbs, hair, even eyes. He falters. Danny takes the opportunity and pushes him away, fires 3 times. The man falls, shock alive on his face. Danny elbows me aside and I stumble against the brick, nearly go over into the basement. He runs to the centre of the road, stands with legs wide apart, waits, fires once. I hear a mute thud. "Sherwin," I want to say, and I can't. I scream, louder and longer this time. When I open my eyes, I'm huddled against the cold steps, and they're still there. The dead man. Danny prone in the centre of the road as though his feet are stuck. He looks at me, and his eyes are like tarmac. He comes back to the building steps, looms over me. I flinch. His face crumples. "Nicky, I'm sorry. I'll take care of you. I love you." I'm crying too much to say anything. He reaches out a hand and I have to take it. His fingers are cold as the concrete beneath me, which makes me cry even harder. He lifts me to my feet. It's only us now.
Korsha Newland is a novelist, playwright, screenwriter and short story writer. His many books include The Scholar, The Dying Wish and Music for the Off-Key. He is the co-editor of IC3, the Penguin Book of New Black Writing in Britain, and, most recently, Tell Tales for The Global Village. Korsha is a resident writer at the Kingston Writing School. He blogs at korshanewland.com.
Poetry is
Oh, we know all about winter. Weatherproof, full of nameless sensations, overgrown melancholy, cover it in goosebumps, fur against rain, ankle-long coats. These fairy tales will last a day, 2, a week at most. And I know the lies they call religion, I've seen it on television. Still, something there, someone who exists, catches, wraps itself around this disbelief, blankets, stories to be told. The birth, the star, the woman asleep in hay.
The Woman Asleep in the Hay, Awake, Friday Night, and Hoodin Van. 3 poems for winter by Nikki Decker.
Awake, Friday night. Hope condenses up the cellar, runs in beams along my arms. Our clemency works as a heater. Praise who forgets it all, these people who worship what ignores and expels, cannot possibly like themselves. She ponds before a mirror, reduces tragedy to hair. She knows there is nothing, but tells herself. The void that feeds a monotone. Another fist in my gut pulls out a trust. No, this won't be a single night, won't be a worthless life, won't be a... It is worthwhile, becoming extinct. Undressed and unmoved, I must remain within, touch my skin, touch my skin. Houden van. Without the preposition van, of, from, to love is simply to hold, houden. At this kind of moment, at the stir alive of night, I am not truly tired, lean towards unconscious, my eyes yawn a stretch inside my chest. I want to call out, for you, to love me, let the wail and blow collide. This bed is big enough, you see, this home is soft, this hair, well, you can wash it. I have stayed to be caressed or carefully pulled apart. It won't be long, my love, before you hold my lungs inside your hands. It is all up to you to love me, let the neighbours knock.
Nikki Decker is a bilingual poet from the Netherlands, currently studying for an MA in creative writing at Kingston University. She blogs at nikkidecker.com. Fiction now, from Samuel Park.
The day the suitor was to arrive, the entire house was in a whirl, for they rarely had guests, and never any of consequence. They all felt invested in this, as if they'd been movie extras, previously forgotten in a green room, and had finally been asked to report to the soundstage for their scene. The boys, all dressed up in their best, and father-in-law and mother-in-law put on their hanboks. Suja herself spent the morning making sweet rice cakes. She steamed the grain until it became sticky and pounded it on the mortar until it hardened. She then covered the white cake with mashed red beans, cutting it into square pieces. Suja did not complain as she prepared the confection. In the years since her wedding, Suja had mastered what she called her outside Haho face. Serious, though not serious enough to the point of being a frown. She put that mask on, preventing others from looking in and seeing her unhappiness. With it, she could hide her anger and frustration and expertly play the part of the obedient daughter-in-law. For Suja, that was a job like any other, and if she couldn't be a diplomat, then she would take all her energy and discipline and channel it to the household. While her sister-in-law frequently feigned being ill to avoid doing chores, Suja rose without complaint early every morning and did the work that kept things running. Around the time the suitor was supposed to arrive, Suja ran back toward her room to change. She wanted to make her daughter and herself look more presentable. She was about to go in when she saw mother-in-law walking urgently in her direction. "The rice cakes are on the plate. I'm just getting changed," Suja told her. But mother-in-law, her hanbok gown sweeping the floor, kept walking until she reached her. She looked worried. "Hannah's mother, go for a walk with your daughter and stay out for a few hours." "Go out? Why?" Suja stood on the small walkway between the main house and her own quarters. Her daughter leaned against her legs playfully. "Just until he's gone." Suja looked at her, stung. "Why? Why can't I stay?" "Because of the way you look." "The way I look?" asked Suja, more confused than offended. "Like a poor relation." Suja looked down at her old pink cotton shirt, faded after many washings, her indigo skirt, passé now but fashionable a few years back. "It's cold outside," said Suja curtly, holding her daughter closer to her. "I don't want Hannah to get sick." "You're always dying to go out, to do this, to do that. Now I ask you for a good reason and you're reluctant. You're like the stubborn frog in the folk tale, always doing the opposite of what he's asked. I'll just wait in my room until he's gone." "No! The child's going to make a racket and disturb the guest." "Child? You mean your granddaughter," said Suja, indignation scorching her body. "Yes, granddaughter, not grandson. You have a big mouth for someone who's failed at her only duty in life. Now go. You remember what happened the last time you disobeyed me?" "You took Hannah away from me for a day," said Suja, the memory still branded into her brain. "Yes. Let's see how you'd like it if I made that a week. But the problem isn't her, it's you. You can leave her behind if you want," said mother-in-law, turning around and rushing back to the main house. Suja wouldn't leave Hannah behind any more than she would leave behind an arm or a hand. Hannah went everywhere with her. How unfortunate that mothers didn't have pouches on their bellies like kangaroo mothers did. Hannah, who'd been listening to this conversation carefully and who loved leaving the house, glanced at her, waiting for her decision. Saying nothing, Suja put a coat on her daughter and placed a warm woolen cap over the child's head. Hannah spontaneously danced, as she always knew when Suja gave her the cap that she'd get to go for a walk. "I like Amma when Amma take me out," said Hannah, the words roundly slipping out of her lips. "I know, but it's cold, Hannah." "I don't like Amma," Hannah protested, thinking that her mother had changed her mind. "But you just said you did," Suja teasingly replied. "Only when Amma take me out." "Oh, so only when Amma take Hannah out?" asked Suja, kneeling in front of her smiling. "You don't like Amma all the time?" Hannah shook her head. "No. Amma likes Hannah all the time, though. Does Hannah like Amma when I give her sweet potatoes?" "I like Amma." "How about when I sing a song for Hannah?" "I like Amma." "Then I guess I'm going to have to take you out all the time and give you sweet potatoes and sing to you, huh?" "Yes, do that." "Do that?" Suja could not hide her delight. "All right, I'll do that." On her way out, Suja saw everyone nervously and excitedly gathering in the main room. Nobody noticed her, the whole family caught up in the roles they were to play. Only Duho, who was now 14 and who appreciated her help with his homework, stopped her and asked where she was going. When she told him she had an urgent errand, he smiled mischievously and said not to worry, as he'd fill her in later and let her know if the suitor was ugly or handsome and what kind of clothes he wore. If he wore flannel pants, Duho said, he'd make faces at him. She smiled back at him and continued walking to the door. As she made her way into the courtyard, Suja noticed the fish swimming in the murky lotus pond. There were 4 or 5 of them, and they seemed as excited as the people inside, rushing off in all directions. Suja smiled, admiring their intense colours and odd shapes. A yellow koi with a long tail, some goldfish with protruding mouths, twin orfs with silvery fins. The fish were about to disappear from her line of vision when she noticed the first specks of snow of the season landing on the stone edges of the pond. Suja looked around, hoping to find Duho or one of the boys, but they were all inside, adjusting their outfits and combing their hair. But she could not find a servant either. There had been many forecasts of snow, and Suja wondered why no one had had the forethought to remove the fish from the pond and put them indoors. As Hannah cooed at her beloved pets, her little fingers tracing their zigzags, Suja realised that the fish had been simply left to die. With no further thought, Suja reached for a pot and tried to use it to scoop up the fish. She failed the first few times, with the fish too alert to her, anticipating her movements. Suja grew frustrated, aware that the suitor could be arriving at the house at any moment. Mother-in-law would be furious if she caught her still at home. But the more eagerly Suja approached the fish, the quicker they seemed to evade her, swimming out of the pot each time she tried to lift it out the water. "Oh, you dumb, dumb fish," Suja muttered under her breath. "Can't you see I'm trying to save you? What do you think is going to happen if you stay in the pond?" Suja placed the pot by the side of the pond. She decided she would have to try to catch the fish by hand. Trying to ignore the glacially cold water, Suja lowered her outstretched palms into the pond and waited for one of the fish to linger over them. She could barely keep her hands still as the cold seemed to travel directly to her brain. She fought the temptation to free her hands, watching as they trembled. When a goldfish that had been lying sluggish at the bottom of the pond finally rested above her palms, Suja snapped her hands shut. She could feel the fish beating against her flesh wildly, obviously unaware that she was trying to save it. As if reading her mother's mind, Hannah quickly raised the half-empty pot in her mother's direction, spilling much of the water. Suja opened her hands into it. The tiny fish flopped in the air for a second and then seemed to take a dive, careening wildly back and forth before it finally settled down. Suja repeated this with the others, one by one. By the time she'd finished, her hands had turned a ghostly white, and she could no longer feel any sensation in them. Suja sighed with relief, glad that she was done before the suitor's arrival and before the snowstorm started. But just as she was about to finally make her way out of the courtyard, Suja heard the gate open and saw a handsome man in his 30s wearing a Western-style suit walk hurriedly toward her. He had surprisingly long hair, with bangs that fell slightly over one eye and a healthy tan that spoke of far away, of long retreats in the mountains. He smiled overexcitedly and delivered a deep, heartfelt bow. Suja bowed back and knew right away that this was the suitor, Isiul. "Did I get the wrong time? I thought I was early, but maybe I'm late, as I see you've gotten impatient and decided to leave," said Isiul. Suja saw that he had mistaken her for Na-young. She glanced over to see the matchmaker still at the front gate, haggling with the taxi driver who'd brought them there in his Sonara. "You're mistaking me for Nam's daughter," Suja told him, trying to think of an excuse to leave. "I'm his daughter-in-law." "I don't believe you. I think you saw my ugly mug and changed your mind," teased Isiul. "You're going to ask some ugly cousin to pass herself off as you." "Who do you think this is, then?" asked Suja impatiently, pointing at Hannah, who'd been hiding her face against her mother's hips. "Some child you're babysitting," Isiul said, scratching his arms. Around this time, mother-in-law and Na-young appeared next to them, and both looked horrified to see Suja and Isiul together. Suja tried to think of something to say so she could leave without appearing rude. Before she could speak, however, Suja was interrupted by the matchmaker. The old woman had finally joined them, pocketing the extra coin she'd saved through the haggling.
I see you've already met Min's mother and her lovely daughter Na Young,
said the matchmaker, ignoring Suja completely.
Min's mother, Na Young, this is the suitor I spoke so highly about. He comes from a wonderful family that owns property in Seoul, and he is a very successful engineer.
The matchmaker stopped once she noticed the frown on mother-in-law's face. The suitor turned to look at Na Young, the true intended, and his smile immediately vanished. Na Young saw this, and she looked as if she was on the verge of tears. Suja wanted to disappear. The suitor turned to mother-in-law and bowed, all his enthusiasm gone. I'm sorry. I've made a foolish mistake. I'm honoured to meet you, Min's mother. Not knowing what to say or do, Suja nodded her head slightly to the others and began to walk away. But before she could take a single step, the suitor turned to her. Where are you going? Isyul asked, confused. I have to go. I really have to, said Suja, picking up the bucket of fish. No, you must stay for tea, said Isyul, taking the bucket from her hands and putting it back on the ground.
She has to go! Let her go! Snapped the mother-in-law. Come inside before the apples turn sour and dark.
But the suitor would not budge. I expect the whole family to be there, Isyul said sternly. What kind of a first meeting is this where not everyone is there? Are you trying to hide something?
No, of course not,
said mother-in-law, offering him a strained smile. Then let's all go in, he said. Suja tried to escape one more time, but the suitor reached for her arm and then pointed the way with his right hand, as if he were the host and she the guest. He walked next to her the entire way to the house, ignoring mother-in-law and never looking at Na Young. Suja glanced behind for Hannah and saw that she had picked up the pot with the fish inside and was carrying it into the house. In the main room, 2 serving trays with tea, rice cakes and sliced pears had been set up on the floor, one for the adults and one for the children. Suja saw the look of surprise on her father-in-law's face when he saw her coming back in. He clearly had to hide his reaction, however, as he received the suitor. The boys, too, looked confused to see Suja and Hannah still there, though Duho smiled, quietly cheering their presence. After a series of bows between the guests and their hosts, Isyul finally sat down on a mat, asking Suja to remain next to him. Suja reluctantly agreed, knowing that if she refused, she'd simply be drawing more attention to his request. Suja sat down, telling Hannah to join the boys at the small table. Mother-in-law plopped down on the other side of the suitor, with father-in-law sitting across from Suja. Na Young and the matchmaker remained the furthest from the suitor, completing the square.
Isyul, you haven't spoken a word yet to Na Young, said the matchmaker in an animated manner. Have you ever seen such a beauty? I knew at once that you two would make a fashionable pair.
Don't call her a beauty, matchmaker. It's too much for her to live up to. Who can stand so much pressure? Asked Isyul. He looked quite pleased with himself, as if he'd just said something very wise. He didn't notice the look of annoyance on mother-in-law's face, or the embarrassment registering in Na Young's eyes.
Did I mention already that your zodiac signs are very compatible? Asked the matchmaker, ignoring Isyul's comment. You being a horse, and Na Young a dog.
What sign are you, Hannah's mother? Asked Isyul, turning to Suja. As the suitor glanced adoringly at her, Suja understood why mother-in-law had wanted her gone during his visit. I'm a tiger, and my husband's a rabbit, said Suja, quickly but patiently. She prayed that Na Young would not notice the way Isyul stared at her, but when Suja looked in the direction of her sister-in-law, her heart sank. Na Young seemed to be fighting back tears and trying to hide her face. Isyul eventually noticed the subtle dance of gazes between Suja and Na Young. He shook his head, as if chastising himself, and took mother-in-law's hand into his. With all this talk of animals, I'm forgetting the real purpose of my visit. Mother-in-law's face brightened. There's no real purpose for this visit. My only concern is that you enjoy yourself. If I'm not paying enough attention to Na Young, Isiul continued, it isn't because I don't find her enchanting. It's just that the bride is only half the matter. The other half is the family. The matchmaker nodded. It's very smart of you to know that, and I can assure you that the Lee family is a truly extraordinary one. Isiul gave her a sceptical glance. You have to say that. They're paying you. The matchmaker let out a loud snort. It registered as a girlish chuckle, but was really more of a rebuke. Mother-in-law laughed as well, as if trying to pass his comment off as a joke. I should ask someone more objective, someone who has nothing to gain from this, said Isiul. He then turned to Suja in a theatrical manner. Not long ago you were in the same boat that I am. What do you think of this family? Are you glad you married into it? I'm not sure what you mean by that, said Suja, trying to buy time. She knew that everyone's eyes suddenly fell on her. She also knew what lies they expected her to say. This is a wonderful family. I'm asking a simple question, said Isiul, his manner growing a little more impatient. I'm asking if you recommend that I take your in-laws as my in-laws. Suja looked around her. She could see her mother-in-law piercing daggers into her with her eyes, and Na Young looking as if she was about to faint. But Suja had never been able to lie when asked a direct question. I'm sorry, Isiul, but I cannot answer that. Suja excused herself and rose to leave. She reached for Hannah and the bucket of fish, and then made her way out. She knew the suitor would not stay much longer, and in spite of mother-in-law's efforts, would probably never return.
Victoria Strachan read an extract from This Burns My Heart, a novel by Samuel Park. Samuel is an assistant professor of English at Columbia College, Chicago. He is a graduate of Stanford University and the University of Southern California, where he earned his doctorate. This Burns My Heart is Samuel's debut novel. It was named one of Kirkus Review's best books of 2011 and is available now from Simon & Schuster.
A Letter to the Editor, originally published in the New York Sun in 1897. Dear Editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says, if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O'Hanlon. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They've been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant, in his intellect as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The external light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if you did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus. But that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not. But that's no proof that they're not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside. But there's a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond.
You've been listening to Cursive Script, new fiction, poetry, essays and sound, brought to you by the Kingston Writing School. Before we go, we have time for one more poem. Evening, Autumn, Winter. Found poetry by Paige Sinclair. But before we hear Paige's piece, it remains to be said thank you to Ali Kazemi, David Rogers and Neil Wood. Cursive Script is presented by me, Laura Bottomley, and produced by Matt Cunningham. For full credits, including reader and writer biogs and links to the musicians you heard throughout the podcast, visit our website at kingstonwritingschool.com.
Evening, autumn, winter. Evening, eventide, evensong, vespers. Afternoon, afternoon tea, 5 o'clock. Sunset, sundown, setting sun, going down of the sun. Dusk, twilight, gloaming. Autumn, fall, fall of the year, fall of the leaf, harvest, harvest time. Harvest moon, hunter's moon, Indian summer, autumnal equinox, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. Vespertine, evening, dusky, crepuscular, dark. Half-light, candlelight, cockshut, close of day, nightfall, dark, night-time, darkness. Dim, nightly, nocturnal, noctivagant, benighted, late, bedtime. Winter, wintriness, winter-time, winter-tide, midwinter, winter solstice. Midnight, dead of night, witching time, night watch, small hours, wintry. Grow cold, lose heat, drop in temperature, feel cold, chatter, shiver, tremble, shake, quake, quiver, shudder, didder, freeze. Winter-bound, frosty, frost-bound, snowy, glacial, ice-capped, glaciered, like ice. Cold as charity, cold as Christmas, cold as marble, stone cold, cold as death. Late, late at night, by night, all through the night.
On the next cursive script,
to be a human being basically means to have conflicting and coexisting voices inside.
Bonnie Greer talks to Elif Shafak about life, writing, and the true meaning of jihad.
She calls his name on a plane and says, "Come here, jihad! Don't go to the toilet, jihad! Wait for me!"
Cursive script is a mix of new writing and sound, brought to you by the Kingston Writing School. Don't miss a single issue. Subscribe for free by visiting us at kingstonwritingschool.com and clicking the link, or search for us on iTunes.
Interconnected. Every point along the circle is of equal distance to the center, which they believe is love.